Midnight Files, Video 3 title. He walked away from home and vanished. The Steven Koecher mystery. Hook, midnight to 0:30. Imagine leaving your home on an ordinary afternoon. No warning. No goodbye. No explanation. And then, you simply disappear. In December 2009, Steven Koecher left his home in Henderson, Nevada. He was caught on surveillance video driving through a nearby neighborhood. But after that, Steven Koecher was never seen again. More than a decade later, his disappearance remains unsolved. So what happened to Steven Koecher? And why did his final movements raise so many questions? This is the story of one of America's most mysterious missing person cases. Part 1. Who was Steven Koecher? 0:30 to 1:30. Steven Koecher was a 30-year-old man living in Henderson, Nevada. To people who knew him, his disappearance was completely unexpected. On December 13, 2009, Steven left his home. There was nothing immediately obvious to suggest that he was planning to disappear. But later that day, surveillance cameras captured something unusual. Steven drove to a residential neighborhood in Henderson. His vehicle stopped near a home. And then Steven got out. What happened next is where the mystery begins. Part 2, The Last Known Movements, 1:30 to 2:45. Surveillance footage showed Steven walking away from his vehicle. He appeared to be moving through the neighborhood on foot. But he wasn't seen getting into another vehicle. And he didn't return to his own car. His car was eventually discovered abandoned. Inside were personal belongings. There was no clear explanation for why Steven would leave his vehicle behind. Investigators and people following the case were left with a simple question. Why would a man intentionally walk away from his car and never come back? His final movements became one of the most important pieces of the investigation. But the footage didn't provide an answer. It only showed where Steven had been, not where he was going. Part 3, The Disappearance, 2:45 to 4 o'clock. As time passed, Steven failed to return home. His family became increasingly concerned. A missing person investigation followed. Searches were conducted. Authorities examined his known movements and attempted to determine what had happened after he left the neighborhood. But there was a major problem. There was no confirmed sighting of Steven after that day. No clear destination. No confirmed transportation. And no definitive evidence explaining his disappearance. The case became a puzzle with a missing final piece. And as investigators looked deeper, several theories began to emerge. Part 4, What could have happened? 4 to 5:45. One possibility is that Steven voluntarily disappeared. Perhaps he wanted to leave his previous life behind. But there is a problem with that theory. His disappearance appeared unusual enough to concern the people who knew him. And there was no clear evidence showing where he intended to go. Another possibility is that Steven encountered someone after leaving his vehicle. But again, there is no definitive evidence establishing exactly who that person might have been. Then there is the possibility that something happened to Steven while he was walking through the neighborhood. An accident. A confrontation. Or something far more serious. But without a confirmed sighting or physical evidence, investigators have never been able to establish exactly what happened. And that uncertainty is what makes this case so haunting. Part 5, The Questions That Remain, 5:45 to 6:40. Why did Steven leave his vehicle? Where was he going? Did he meet someone? Did he leave the area voluntarily? Or did something happen to him that same day? Those questions have remained unanswered for years. And perhaps the most frustrating part of the case is that Steven's final known movements were partially captured on camera. We know he was there. We know he walked away. But we don't know what happened next. Ending, 6:40 to 7:15. More than a decade later, Steven Koecher's disappearance remains an open mystery. His family was left without the answers they desperately needed. And the final chapter of Steven's story remains unwritten. Sometimes, the most disturbing mysteries aren't the ones where we know what happened. They're the ones where we know exactly where the story stopped, but have no idea what came next. If you enjoy unsolved mysteries, disappearances, and unexplained cases, subscribe to Midnight Files. And tell us in the comments, what do you think happened to Steven Koecher? Until next time, keep the lights on. This is Midnight Files.